Hello? Okay, you guys can hear me, that's good. Welcome everyone. Welcome to the first Black History Month event that we are holding as TBEN. That's the Black Economists Network. So that's our logo just there. So in today's event, we're literally going to talk about the contributions of Black economists to society and everything like that. But then we're also going to put this in context of what's currently happening in the UK economy, particularly Black people in the UK. So we've got panelists from different areas. So we've got Shomi, who is a therapist, and we've got Iman, who's a financial advisor. We'll also be presenting with my colleague, Betty, who's also at the Black Economists Network. Ayo Disu is running a little bit late, so he might walk in, do the walk of shame, but don't be alarmed, he's on his way. I'm going to get started now. Just a bit of housekeeping. The men's toilets are on this side, just as you go out, and the women's toilets are on this side as you go out, so that's my right, but your left, and vice versa. If there is a fire, we're not expecting one. The exits are literally through these doors behind me. So hopefully there are no fires or anything like that, but we're good if there is. And if you need to connect to the Wi-Fi code is on the screen here. So you will need the Wi-Fi actually, because we do have polls on Slido. So it'll be good to get connected. Can you all see that? Is it good, is it? Okay, that's great. Cool. And also the Slido hashtag is hashtag TBENBHM. So that's how you can log in. But so let's get started. So I think I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Felicia, Felicia O'Dampton. I am an economist, but I'm also the founder and director of the Black Economists Network. So essentially, I wanted to get started with how many Black economists can you actually name? So, Ayo's here. Ayo can take a seat. Cool. Yeah. So, if you guys log into Slido, please vote. But in the meantime, and this is going to be up until we pull out the results in about 5 minutes, 10 minutes time or so. But essentially, how many Black economists can you name was a question that was on my mind as I was studying economics in my undergrad and for my master's. And this was because there wasn't anyone that looked like me when I was studying on the reading list. There wasn't any prominent economists that came up that were Black. I thought this was an issue in academia because there's only like 2 or 3% of professors in the UK that are Black. So I thought, okay, maybe if I join the public sector, things might be better, it might be different. But when I got there, I realized, this is not different. It's lacking. And so I was like, where are all the Black economists? So I was like, okay, why don't I just find them? Let me set up a network to connect with Black people in economics and related fields. And that's how TBEN got started. We launched in 2019 November, and since then, we've grown a lot. So why are we needed? Essentially, a lack of diversity at the highest levels of economic policy making and research has implications for wider society. So a lack of attention to the issues that affect particular minority groups leads to a lack of information and data, and ultimately that leads to poor decision making and negative outcomes. As a result, it deprives economics of its best chance to serve everyone most effectively. And that's why I set up TBEN. So we are an organization dedicated towards providing a platform through which professionals and students of Black, African, and Caribbean descent in economics and related fields can connect, collaborate, and support each other. But we also seek to challenge the lack of diversity within economics by raising Black people who are working in the field and also working alongside organizations on their diversity strategies as well. So we have 4 key aims. Our aims are 1, to connect. So this is about building a community for professionals in the field to network, collaborate, and establish lifelong networks. The second one is to educate. So this is about equipping current and aspiring professionals in the field on career options and the skills needed for progression. And the third one, which is in line with our event today, is to inspire. We want to inspire debate on topical economic issues, on alternative economic perspectives, and promote an environment where people can learn from each other and explore some of these ideas. And finally, we want to make a change. We want to have influence. So we want to change the status quo and work with economics organizations to challenge and tackle the lack of diversity in the field. And we're doing that. So far, we have 700 members. At the moment, we have slightly more professionals in the network than we have students. This is likely to grow as students graduate and become professionals within the field. We're also a global network, so we operate across Africa, the Americas, the Caribbean, and Europe, as far as Australia as well. We also have started a podcast, which we're going to launch season 2. So if you are interested, stay tuned. And also subscribe, because, season 2 is coming. We need to subscribe, the listenership. But yeah, and then finally, we've worked with a range of organizations, from the Bank of England to the Competitions and Markets Authority, to Ofcom, Rethinking Economics, to essentially either collaborate with them on workshops, training programs, or give some of our members an opportunity to speak on some of these platforms. So, we're doing the work to diversify economics. So, I hope you guys all got a chance to vote on how many Black economists you can name. We're going to pull up the results to see what you guys actually said. Okay, so most of you, can name about 1 to 3 economists, and then 0. None of you can name 4 or above, so that's a shame, but I'm going to try and change that for you today. So, sorry, I'm going to go through, someone added, that's not looking too good. So I'm going to go through the contributions of Black economists in society, so that, we can beef up some of those numbers, because essentially you may have heard of like John Maynard Keynes or even Adam Smith, or you may have even heard of Milton Friedman, but how many of you actually do know some Black economists? And I'm going to go through some of them, some of the works. So I'm going to take you through the works of Thandika Makandawa, Phyllis Wallace, and Sir Arthur Lewis, which some of you may be familiar with already. So starting off, I'm going to talk about the contributions of Thandika Makandawa. So Thandika unfortunately passed away recently in 2020. So this one is still quite raw to me, but his work resonates so much and is really important. So Thandika was a Malawian economist and was professor and chair of the African Development at the London School of Economics. He's a widely published scholar on social sciences in Africa. His research primarily focuses on development, economics, and social policy. But his story is actually an interesting one. So he was born in Malawi in 1940 and later resettled in Zambia as a child. He later grew up to discover that Black Africans were only employed in lower status jobs, and that the higher status jobs were reserved for white people in Zambia. This was because of the strictly enforced apartheid regime in their labor markets. But that didn't stop him. He later went on to study in the United States, South Africa, and later settled in Sweden, where he was a political refugee. And then eventually he became the director of the UN Social Development Institute and also the chair of African Development at LSE. His work was revolutionizing their policy research agenda and shifting the focus from these vague macroeconomic indicators to bringing back the importance of social issues in policy making. So more specifically, following the independence era that many African countries went through, many of them were trying to build their welfare systems after the debt crisis and found themselves really crippled by structural adjustment programs imposed on them by the United States, which forced them to abandon the universal approach to social provisions and safety nets for the poor and focus on this neoliberal agenda which prioritized private interest over the public. And in his commitments towards economic and social change, he rejected this neoliberal turn in economics and bravely stood up for social policies. And that's why I really appreciate his work, and hopefully this can inspire you to look into some of the work that he has done. And next I want to talk about Phyllis Wallace. Not many people speak about her work, especially in the field of economics. So I say economics has a PR issue. There's lots of talk about diversity in economics because we just don't have enough women and we don't have enough black people. So you can imagine what the stats are like for black women in economics. And Phyllis Wallace was a woman in economics, a black woman in economics who achieved quite a lot. So she was a distinguished African-American economist and activist, as well as the first woman to receive a doctorate in economics at Yale University. And her work specifically focused on racial as well as gender discrimination in the workplace. Despite her ranking first in her high school class, state law at the time didn't allow her to attend her all-white University of Maryland. But again, just like Thandika, that didn't stop her. She devoted a lot of her work as an economist to study black unemployment in the States, particularly among women, and her mission was to root out workplace discrimination. In 1965, she joined the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission as Chief of Technical Studies, and which was established after the civil rights to remove workplace discrimination. And her work was successful. Her research actually led to the landmark ruling by the federal government against AT&T in 1973, where the telecom giant was actually found guilty of gender and racial discrimination. And her work actually helped change the United States government way in how they measured employment statistics for black women. So she single-handedly was able to help change the laws against workplace discrimination. So she's an important figure that you should add to your list of black economists that you now know. And then finally, I want to talk about Sir Arthur Lewis. If you don't know Sir Arthur Lewis, now you do. He was actually a St. Lucian-born development economist and became the president of the Caribbean Development Bank. And he initially wanted to be an engineer, but due to the way racism was set up at the time, they didn't allow him to do that. But he actually then became an economist, which was actually a great blessing to the field. So he later, at the age of 18, earned a scholarship to attend the London School of Economics, which at the time was the most prestigious university in the world for economics, and was the first black individual to actually ever enter gain acceptance into LSE. And as an economist, his most famous contribution to the field was his work on capital and wages in developing countries, which led him to develop the Lewis model. And as a result of this work, he was the only black person to win a Nobel Prize in economics in 1979. And I think he still remains the only black person to have a Nobel Prize in economics since before I was born. So you can see why there's an issue there in economics and diversity. But he wasn't only great for that. He also, when in the independence era, when Ghana gained its independence, he was appointed as their first economic advisor and helped draw up their 5-year development plan. He went back to the Caribbean and became a vice chancellor of the University of West Indies. And a few years later, he was knighted for his contributions in economics. And if you've been around the University of Manchester or you've been there, I have. He actually has a building named after him called the Arthur Lewis Building. So he was very influential in that sense. But today, we're not just going to talk about the contributions of black economists. We recognize that their work has been really important to the field. And actually, some of the issues that they worked on and some of the contributions and things they were trying to change haven't left our society, particularly in the context of black people and economics in the UK. So I'm going to pass on to my colleague, Betty, who's going to take us through some of the context.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Betty Baraki. I'm an economist and a researcher at the New Economics Foundation, a think tank in London. I specialize in well-being economics, local economic development work, and inequality. So I'll be sharing with you a quick snapshot about the current context or the critical issues facing the black community today in the UK. But before we do that, we have another question for you. So if you could please answer the question here: how optimistic are you feeling about the UK economy We just learned that the Prime Minister resigned today, less than 2 months into the job. So I'm sure you'll have lots of opinions about that. So yeah, this is a great time to be alive. Or is the economy in tatters? So we've got identified about 3 to 4 themes that we're going to cover across the economy and how the things have been impacting the Black community. So we will start with politics and the specific policies that have been disproportionately impacting the Black community and other ethnic minority groups. So we've had an increasing proportion of ethnic minority politicians in the government recently, particularly under Boris Johnson. However, with that, we've also had specific policies that have negatively impacted the Black community. For example, the Windrush scandal, disparities in the COVID-19 outcomes, the hostile environment for refugees, and so forth. And with the current cost of living crises, the Black and minority ethnic people are disproportionately falling faster and further below the poverty line. And the Black minority and ethnic groups are 2.5 more times likely to be in relative poverty and over 2 times more likely to be in deep poverty than their white counterparts. This obviously has a negative impact on people's personal finance. So recent research shows that Black households, around 54%, were most likely out of all ethnic groups to have a weekly income of less than £600. And in February 2022, 1.2 million adults from a Black-headed household reported having savings of less than £1,500 in their bank account. Moving on to businesses, SMEs, or the small and medium-sized enterprises, make up the vast majority of enterprise across the UK. SMEs make up around 99% of businesses in the UK, and 96% of the SMEs have fewer than 10 people employed. They are a key driver of economic growth and sustainability. And according to Small Business Survey results in 2020, around 16% of SME employers were women-led. The sector most likely to have women-led businesses were health, education, accommodation, and food services. Around 5% of SME employers were led by teams, at least half of which are from minority ethnic groups. And only 17% of all minority ethnic-led firms were led by a woman from an ethnic minority group. The economic contribution of ethnic minority entrepreneurs to the UK is significant and is around £25 billion. And because of the current crisis, starting from the COVID-19 and recent rises in rents and rates, micro, small and businesses are affected in London in particular, and there is a higher risk for potential closure and loss of employment for Black and ethnic minority groups or owned businesses as a result of the current crisis. The final theme that we're going to be covering is health inequality and mental health. So Black and other ethnic groups are more likely to report poorer experiences of using health services and report insufficient support from local services such as housing and social care. The COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on ethnic minority communities. Among males, those of Black African background had the highest rate of death, with a rate of 2.7 times higher than that of white males. While for females, the highest rate was amongst those of Black Caribbean ethnic background at almost twice that of white females. And in terms of mental health, the rate of mental health problems tends to be higher for some Black people and other minority groups than for white people. For example, Black people are 4 times more likely to be detained under Mental Health Act than white people. Some evidence suggests that there is disparity in treatment from mental health services. Black people are significantly overdiagnosed with stigmatizing conditions and given large doses of drugs, and are also under-referred for talking therapies in comparison to white people. And people from Black community are also disproportionately impacted by socioeconomic inequalities, such as unemployment, insecure and low pay, homelessness, crime, discrimination in the workplace, and poverty, which can all then have a negative impact on mental health. And I think that's it from me, and I'm going to hand back to Felicia, and we'll check your results as well.
Oh, okay, I'm back on live. Cool, thank you for that, Betty. So these are the results. You can see, no one can see that this is a great time to be alive. Oh, that's a shame. Like, wow. I mean, we're here now, we've made it. That's something to look forward to. We're ready, we're alive, but maybe it's not a great time. Okay, some people are feeling a little bit optimistic, kind of weird given the events today. But we move, right? And then some people not, I think this is the majority feeling at the moment, especially after we've just learnt that the Prime Minister has resigned. That's the fourth Prime Minister this year? I don't know. Anyways, moving on swiftly. I'm now going to move on to our panellists, just to get some thoughts on what they've thought about some of the things that we've shared today, and maybe get a sense of how the cost of living crisis that we're currently in has affected them in their work and the people that they are working with. So I'm going to start off with Iman to share some reflections. What are some of your reflections on people that you've worked with, or what's happening in the community?
What's my reflections? I call it London bridges falling down. That's pretty much how I see the economy right now, and I'm forever singing that song in my head because it's a hard time. It's a hard time. I've seen a big change for people who are making money. I always tell people I feel like when I speak to my parents, they've been having cost of living crisis since they come off the boat. Like this is not a new situation. The reason that everybody's going mad is because white people are struggling. That's the only reason they care now. Do you know what I mean? I'm talking middle class. I've got clients that are, both people are earning 30k, 35k, and they're using food banks. Do you know what I mean? People have been doing enjoyment. When I was telling them inflation, they were looking at me like I was a stupid guy. Today, they know that I'm not stupid. They're the stupid ones. And that's just karma. And I'm not happy about it, but I'm happy about it. And it's one of those things where, for me, it's like, people are now having to really understand money and understand that actually, yes, you can make it and yes, you can spend it, but actually you need to make it work for you. And I think finally people are understanding that, it's not just you pay your bills and then YOLO. That's the life that a lot of people have been living. So it's time for change, but I feel like the problem is that we look to government and government don't have a clue what to do either. So that's a big problem. They can talk about the energy stuff and all of that type of stuff, but it's not really helping as much as they think it is. They feel like, we've done a price cap, but the price is still crazy. And that's not the only one price that people have to think about. The price of food, we heard yesterday cereal, milk going up. These are foods that when people don't have money, that's what they eat a lot of. But if the things that you eat a lot of have gone up, then now you're struggling to even do that as well. So where's the help for that? So yes, it's a very hard time, but then for those that have money, they're still enjoying, and that's the thing. Like money, I meet clients. There's no cost of living crisis. There's no issue. It's like where's the next opportunity? So I think it's about balance. For me, that's why I always talk about multiple streams of income. This living on one job, one income, that life is over. We need to start thinking about having money coming from multiple places and then making sure that it's working for us.
Thank you for sharing that. Just heads up, everyone, we have the Slido up, so we are doing live questions as well. So if you do have questions you want to ask to any of us on the panel, you can sign into the Slido and get your questions there as well. The cost of living is tight, and I can really resonate with the fact that now we really have to start looking into the value of money and managing our money well, especially as a community. I mean, like people having less than 1.5k in the bank, especially in the community, that's less than 1 month's pay for a lot of people, which means that if things go bad, it's looking kind of shaky after 1 month. So I then wanted to move on to Shomi, who's a therapist, and talk about like what you've seen in your field of work on how this crisis is impacting people you work with in your field.
So I work as a private therapist, and what I've noticed a lot in my clients are increased levels of things like burnout from having to pick up extra jobs, and then some people just straight up telling me that can we move from having a session once a week to once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks because of affordability, which obviously I can't fault them for it. So things, because therapy is a luxury. So when things are better, they can do more of it. When they can't, they're going to do less of it, or just literally just message me saying that they can't continue. So that's how it's affecting it in that way. And then the actual content of the sessions are becoming increasingly about people being stressed because of money, people, wondering how to do stuff, trying to apply for extra jobs, trying to balance their extra job, realizing that now they have 2 jobs and they are struggling to have any time for recreation or for socializing, and life is getting on top of them. So what I used to do most of was things like relationship breakdowns, depression, PTSD. Now I'm seeing an increase in people having problems with just finances, burnout, stress, work-related stress, and just worries about their economic stability, which is pretty new, actually. That's coming up a lot. And then in like the NHS side, so people that access it for public reasons, you're finding more people, because of burnout, actually not attending work. So you're seeing people have things more like work-related stress, sick leave, and stuff like that. So I think that those would be the key areas of change in my field.
Yeah, that's really difficult. I wanted to follow up on that and ask, like, how specifically do you think we can put mental health on the agenda? Because often when we're talking about well-being and mental health in the community, we don't really think about, when we're talking about like economic conditions, etc., we don't talk about mental health as being a key part of that. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on how we can push that as an important factor that we talk about when we're talking about economic well-being.
So that's a bit of a complex one, because when it comes to people prioritizing their basic needs versus their mental health, they're always going to, you have to be able to eat before you can get to a point where you're looking after your mental health and dealing with stress. So the things that they need to do in order to secure themselves is negatively impacting their mental health. But I guess things like, so people pick up things like a lot of shift work that impacts their sleep, which is like one of the number one factors that impacts your mental health. So people become a lot more sleep deprived. So prioritizing stuff like that. People throw their social calendar out the window, which is really bad, because then they don't have any kind of outlets where they are letting off steam, or where they're confiding in people, where they're feeling like a human again. So their life just becomes a cycle where they're just a machine. So prioritizing socializing, whatever that might look like to you, even if you can just fit in a few phone calls, even if it is you just telling somebody, hey, I'm feeling this way, half the time they're feeling the same too. So then you have someone to confide in, you feel a lot less alone. Attending community initiatives, so coming to places like this is a good start. But just really ensuring that you're meeting those basic needs that tend to go out the window, or tend to seem a bit frivolous, especially things like sleeping, especially things like socializing. It's a good place to start.
Yeah, I think we should all start doing some of those things. I know when I get stressed, my friends don't hear from me. It's really bad. But when you're juggling so many different things, like, it's hard. But actually, I realized just taking some time out to hang out with my friends, I feel like I've started a new life, like I'm refreshed. So that's really important, I think. So Ayo, in the world of political commentary, in the world of podcasting, you engage with a lot of people and stuff. From what you've experienced or what you've seen, we've had a lot of black people under the Tories enter the political sphere. And I was wondering if you think the rise in political representation among black people has been influenced by some of that. Do you have any thoughts?
In terms of, what do you mean, any thoughts? In terms of influenced by what?
Do you think that now we are seeing more political engagement in the community amongst people, maybe their discussions, what they're doing, maybe linked to representation, or maybe linked to the conditions of the cost of living crisis?
In terms of, I don't think it's necessarily linked with that. It's quite interesting. I do think we're seeing a slightly higher political engagement amongst our community, but I wouldn't tie it to what we see in the Conservative Party, because naturally we don't really align with such parties. So the last election, I believe, I think 80% of Africans voted for Labour, and I think it was like 88% voted for 80% of Caribbeans voted for Labour. So naturally, as a community, we don't really align with them, despite the high levels of diversity.
In terms of, but what I do think is happening, I think, weirdly enough, social media, I think it's started to drive up the level of engagement. And I'll be very interested to see whenever we have the next general election. It could be next week. It could be they won't do it next week because they'll get crushed. But whenever the next general election is, whether it's next year or the year after, we're interested to see the amounts of Black and Caribbean people, African Caribbean people voting, because I believe leading up to the 2019 general election, 1 in 4 Black people weren't even registered to vote. But what I've seen, because we've gone through like bare seasons of madness. So we had Brexit finally got pushed through, top of 2020, then a young pandemic, then Boris, never ending clown show, then you got, of course, war in Ukraine, which led to the cost of living crisis, and then obviously you got the latest clown show. So because of this, on social media, on the news, politics is heavy on the agenda, and it's so much easier, more dynamic to digest on social media, because other people that, as an individual, you might not be into politics, but you might see some of your people following politics, and they will throw a meme. So you're kind of being entertained, but following it. So I think there is a increase in engagement in that essence. But in terms of like full on, maybe joining their local council or stuff like that, I haven't seen any data for that, but I'm slightly optimistic in terms of our higher engagement in politics.
Fair enough. A quick question, because I think you might have missed it. How optimistic are you feeling about the UK economy at the moment?
Oh, we're done. I've been saying that though. I did say in July that when they're doing the leadership contest where 160,000 Tories Tory members decide who's going to be the next Prime Minister, which is kind of nuts. And it was Liz Truss versus Rishi. I was like, right, if Liz Truss wins, we are doomed. And lo and behold, like she left us with something. So yeah, I'm not very optimistic, because I feel under Jeremy Hunt, who's looking like he's going to stay, depending on what happens next week, we're looking at some form of austerity measures, and we've seen from 2010 what like a good 8 years of Tory austerity did, especially to low income communities. So yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not very optimistic. I'm just telling the truth. Sorry guys. Yeah, it's a bit spooky.
Yeah, fair enough. I'm going to take some questions from the audience now. Does anyone in the audience have questions that they want to ask any of us on the panel? Yeah, sure. Could we get the mic at the front here?
Thank you all the panelists, and this presentation is very useful. My first question would be, because of the cost of living crisis, how would you go about dealing with the black tax, quote unquote, in the fact, meaning how as black people, we have to support our family members with whatever disposable income we do have. And because of the cost of living crisis, it's now extenuating the fact that they're going to be in more hardship. So how would you deal with that from both a financial perspective and a mental health perspective, because you feel under the pressure, you're supporting your mum, supporting your dad, supporting your uncle, supporting all your family members, whether here or back home. So that's my question to the panelists.
Should
Yeah, sure.
So that's actually something that's come up quite a bit. So this obligation of duty that you have to your family, especially if you are doing decently financially, you now have to support mummy, support daddy, pay for this, pay back home and all of that. And the simple thing is just, I guess, assessing yourself and seeing how much of that is pressure, how much of that is you're actually able to do in a feasible way. So being able to say, actually, I want to save this portion for my future, for a deposit, for whatever it is, and this is how much I have to give. And obviously not everybody's going to be happy about it, but it is about prioritizing yourself and seeing what's feasible. Obviously it should never get to a point where you're leaving anyone to starve and die or anything, but if that's not the case, then you do have to kind of grab the bull by the horns and assert what it is that you want for yourself and see what it is that you're able to do willingly that makes sense for you, for your future, in that way.
Yeah, no, you know what? I wanted to go first because she's so much nicer than me. You know. Listen, in a plane, yeah, when the plane goes, what do they tell you? Put your own mask on first. Listen, you lot will stay in the hood with your parents forever if you don't change your situation. There has to be a time where you have to say, listen, this is what I can afford, and that's it. More time, I speak to people, and you're giving money, even the money you're giving, it's not even touching the surface. It's not change. It's not gonna make the difference. Sometimes the way you can make the difference is actually getting out of your situation. Do you know what I mean? Actually focusing on yourself. Now, yes, help, but let's put it honest. In this economy, let's say you're giving £200 a month, yeah, and with everything else, if that's all you can give, they've got to make the best of that. They've got to look at other people, and they've got to look to themselves as well and see what they can do. Sometimes we are even making our parents say, you know what, they're talking to their boss recklessly now. You know what I mean? They're just calling in sick. They're like, no, my son is working. I don't need this. No. They got to chill out. No, for real. I got a couple of football players, yeah, that are clients, and their brothers and sisters are moving crazy. No one can talk to them because my brother's this football player. Like, do you know? I don't need this. We need to relax. We're over. You can only do so much. And the thing is that it's not getting us anywhere. Do you see what I'm saying? You just giving, now they become addicted to it. So for forever now, they need you. But then what happens when you have kids? Like, I got 4 youths. Wow. If my mum tells me that she needs money, mum, it's whatever after these kids are finished. I got nappies, I got Pampers to deal with. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? If she's not happy, don't WhatsApp me. Listen, I'm cool. You sent me too many messages anyway. Life has to move on. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Because at the end of the day, like, for example, when I left my job and my mum was like to me, when are you going to get a job? I was self-employed. When are you going to get a job? When are you going to get a job? Now my business has blown. She said, can you help your dad start a business? Like, sometimes they can only teach you what they know, innit? If all they know is get a job, work, and give us money. You're my pension. That's all I heard my whole life. But now, it's a different time. So we got to teach them, like, okay, this is how it can be. And you've got to know, there's no guilt. There's no guilt. If you're giving the best that you can, like, you've done your budget, you've paid your bills, you've done your investments, this is what's left, give. Other than that, they need to go to church and pray. That's it. They love prayer anyway, innit? Let them pray.
Thank you for that. I mean, yeah, fair enough. Setting boundaries is important with family, especially those of us from migrant communities where we have to give back home. It can be quite tough. But yeah, I wanted to ask if there's any more questions in the audience, and also if we can bring up the Slido to see any questions that might be live. Oh, okay, you guys are engaging. Okay, so I guess we've answered the first question. Thanks for that. Oh, we've got a question in the audience back here.
Yeah, so my question's regarding wealth inequality. Obviously, it's been trending quite consistently to wide, and also the flow of assets are going in one direction. And I'm curious to know how urgent you all feel this is for black people, because we're kind of all still here in London, and the asset prices in London are mad inflated, whereby they might not be like that outside of London, but is this an urgent situation? Because eventually, I'm assuming everywhere will feel like London. And are we kind of sitting still where we should be rapidly moving out?
Yeah, I think this is interesting. It's funny because me and a few of my boys, we speak about actually looking outside of London. And I'm not trying to sound controversial, but sometimes people keep talking about, oh, London's so expensive. I'm like, big man, move then. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's actually other places, especially now with how work is going to more like agile, you can actually work from home. Because obviously, I understand why people live in London. Because if you look at all the data, the highest earning jobs are in London and surrounding counties. So I understand the attraction of living in London, especially if you have a community there, you've grown up there, so on and so forth. But with how the workplaces start developing, you could start to move outside of London, or even if you're fortunate enough to have the money to acquire property, because quite a few of my boys have done that, acquire property outwards. I think with terms of, with regards to wealth inequality, yeah, I think it is urgent. I think it's extremely urgent, because it's looking like we're coming out of like the kind of golden age of low interest rates, where it was not very easy, but it was easier to acquire assets because interest rates are how much you pay on borrowing. So the cheaper borrowing is, the cheaper it is to go acquire assets such as obviously home ownership, stuff like that. So what I would love is just more collaborative efforts, because obviously not everybody's ball or shot caller where you can just go and start picking up houses in Manchester, Leeds, so on and so forth. But if you pally up with a couple of your boys or your girls, or whether it be family, your partner, make sure you get your paperwork straight, you know what I'm saying? They just get sticky. You know what I mean? Family, whoever. But like having 15% of an asset is better than having 0% of jack bleep. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think the more we move in that direction, as well of course, like more financial security and that. Yeah, I think it's super duper urgent because like land, there's only a certain amount of land. Land is not infinite. Do you know what I mean? So you want to. I don't think the rest of the UK will end up like London. It just won't. Some cities might get a bit more popping, but it's not end up like London. But there's still value in having houses, brick and mortar. So there's always value in that. So yeah, I'm a big believer when it comes to the betterment of the black community. I really, really believe it starts with economic power. If the money ain't patterned, everything else is just a mess. That's just the unfortunate truth. So yeah, I think it's super duper urgent.
Yeah, I'm just gonna exploit my chair's privilege to add, based as an economist, like during the pandemic, we got a glimpse into what happens to the black community when crisis happens. And given the fact that we don't have that much wealth within the community, it leaves us in positions where we're very vulnerable to economic shocks. We saw that many of us in the community will be working in lower paid jobs that can be dropped just like that. And the thing with savings and building wealth is that it provides that safety net and security, so that when we are going through hard times, which we are currently in now, I don't know when we're going to stop going through hard times, but listen, it is what it is right now. It gives us that safety net. So I definitely agree with Ayo in terms of the fact that it is very urgent. But anyways, I'm going to throw it back to the panelists if they have anything to add. If not, we'll go to some of the questions on Slido.
Some? No, nothing. No, I just think I agree with everything Disu said. I think it's urgent, but I think also we have to start prioritizing stuff. I think when you think about, we have to prioritize ownership. I don't think in our community we look at ownership as being as important as other communities do. We are very comfortable. Like you get your job and then you're just ready. I'm going to rent because you finally want freedom from the shackles of your parents. But the thing is that once you start renting, you know how difficult it is to then go and buy. And sometimes we're not, like, for me, your household, if you can, your family home should be your platform to wealth. Like, that should be the first piece of wealth anyway. And then you should be able to then use it as a platform. So I've got friends in the Asian community who get married and move into their parents married. You're not even dating and you're gone, you need a bachelor pad. Do you know what I mean? Just in case. And it's like, we've got to change the mentality. Do you know what I mean? You get your first job, you've got an A-class. I don't understand what is happening here. Like, do you know what I mean? By the time you pay the car, the insurance, no wonder there's no more dough. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, actually, sorry, the focus should so much more be about ownership and so much more about actually where's our pride and what do we own, not just to be consumers. Like, you know, how often I see us queuing for iPhones and but no Apple shares, do you know what I mean? And then they'll say, oh, but the shares are expensive. But they've continued to rise because people like you are standing in the street to buy the latest one, even though the one you got already is fine. So the point being is that it's not just an urgency to get ownership in regards to property. We should be urgent in regards to setting up businesses. We should be urgent in regards to owning stocks and shares and ISAs and all of these types of things to make sure that we become owners, because that's where people are going to take us seriously.
Thank you. No, that's important. I think as a community, ownership is something that we should definitely start looking into and start discussing with people, and also realize it's okay to do ownership collectively. Mm-hmm. We don't have to do it as individual units, especially if we're just starting out. But yeah, I'm going to take it to a question that's been upvoted on Slido. So this question is, should multiple streams of income be the default for us? Oh, okay, it's been highlighted. Should that be side hustles? Are you talking about investments, dividends? Like, what's the optimal way? Does anyone want to take that way?
I think the optimal way, in my opinion, is maximizing your income. So whatever that looks like. Do you know what I mean? Because some people, if you're, for example, I know people who work in the healthcare industry, they can't do no side hustle. That's 12 to 12, bro. Trying to get home, they're kettled like this, just preparing for the next 12 to 12. So it's going to be difficult in terms of like a 5 to 9. However, more passive income, for example, investments, that could be a thing. So I know when it comes to this type of stuff, yeah, I'm not going to lie, I think it's so situational. It's just about, all that matters is what the bottom line. Whether it's one income or 75, do you know what I mean? Some people got 3 streams of income, but your one income could be higher. Do you see what I'm saying? So I think But obviously in this day and age now though, thinking about inflation, man are telling me food's going up by 14%. They're putting padlocks on low pack and that. Like, it's probably, if you have the capacity, and that's the main thing, if you have the capacity to scale up, where, for example, I know quite a few, like I have 2 jobs. I know some of my friends that work 2 contracts because in terms of the time they have at home, they can scale. Some people have 5 to 9 hustles, businesses. So it just depends on what you can do with your capacity. But I'm not going to go and make people feel like, yo, I'm working 13-hour days, now I have to come home and do another shift and sleep for 3 hours and then, no.
Yeah.
No, it depends on your situation, in my opinion.
That makes sense.
I was going to say, if you find that you are in a position where you have one stream of income, even looking at how to maximize that. So things like negotiating your salary, things like moving around as well. So have you been working there for a while? What is the market rate? Just evaluating that. A lot of people, because they're quite comfortable in a situation, they are very hesitant to do anything to rock the boat. But this is the time to rock the boat, to be honest. Just try not to put yourself in that hole.
Yeah, for me, it's imperative. Like, and I totally get what this is saying about hours and time and so forth. But even if you're working those hours, hopefully you should have money, and so your money has to be working for you. So even if you can't work, you need to be putting your money somewhere to work. So for example, I had a client the other day who was like, "Oh, I've got 10k in the bank, I'm getting no interest." I was like, "Don't you have a friend that has a business that needs a loan?" Loaned it. Now you're getting 10% a year. But it was sitting in the bank and in 0.1 for how long? Sometimes we're not thinking about actually, I can make my money work for me rather than it just sit here. And as long as you've got contracts and all of that type of stuff, you can actually put it to work. There are investments. Obviously, if you set up a limited company, as long as you've got 25%, that 25% can come from 4 of you. So even if you might be time poor, but you might have money. So then partner up with someone that has a bit more time and maybe has less money, and then you can have equal shares going forward, whether it be that person will be the one going to look for properties or whatever while you're work. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? It's like, you got to make your money work. You got to make it work. Like, there's no, like, if we know that millionaires, the average millionaire has 7 streams of income, us sitting here saying have one, because even if you, like you said, negotiate a higher salary, the taxman's saying, yeah, do that. I'm on you. I'm taking more. Like, do you know what I mean? And we're seeing it now. So that then tells you, do I really want it to be employed? If I'm going to make more money, do I want to make more money PAYE, or do I want to make more money as a contractor, or more money into my limited company where I can draw that as dividends, or I can start to play with that money, or I can add my parent onto that and take it out and start being smart with how I take this money out in the most tax efficient way. So yes, make more money. Obviously, if you can get a bonus from work, get whatever you can. But also think about, can I contract this? Because too many of us are sitting employed on 30k and the guy next to you is getting £400 a day doing the exact same job.
Facts.
But because you want the security of a paycheck each month and not. But if someone gets what you get in a year, in 6 months, they've got 6 months to find another job. Doesn't sound risky to me. So it's about us looking at how do we make it work for us and make sure we're getting the most for the skills that we bring.
Yeah, no, I hear it. Yeah. I just wanted to check if there's any more questions in the audience. Oh, over here.
Thank you. This has been really good, and I really appreciate the diversity on the panel in terms of different viewpoints and coming from different angles. I think it's been really enlightening. I know you've spoken a lot about interest rates and the cost of living crisis, but I thought it would be good as well to look at the kind of more macro picture and think about the biggest threats and opportunities facing the black community over the next year or over the medium term.
Oh, that's a big question.
Okay, macroly, in terms of the biggest threats facing the black community, I think the black community are going to face the exact same threats as the rest of the country will. Unfortunately, a good proportion of the black communities are attributed to lower income households. So with a lot of the country as well, the cost of living crisis is going to continue, unfortunately. Inflation, there's no sign of inflation slowing down. And I think a week or two ago it came out that earnings have increased by 5%, which in a normal year, that's like, raw, 5%. Obviously, if inflation double that, then we're just getting, do you know what I mean? Or we just get slaps. And also, I think one of the biggest threats to a lot of people is the increase in interest rates, simply because people's mortgages are about to get very, very rough. Do you know what I mean? Some people are enjoying a young 1%, now they tell you 6%.
Mad.
You know what I'm saying? Yeah, like, look, 3 weeks ago, our version told me her mortgage is going up by £400.
Yeah.
Like, imagine that. Like, think about not over the year, every month an extra 4 bills is coming from your account. Do you know what I mean? Like, one of my boys, he's got quite a big house. He said his mortgage will go up by 1.8k. When he's doing his remortgaging his rate, 1.8k every month. So I think that's a big threat, because when you think about a lot of households, taking an extra 400, 500, 600, £700, God forbid, even more from a household every month is absolutely shattering. Let alone the fact that food's gone up, fuel's gone up, your energy's gone up, and this winter a lot of people are going to be choosing between food and energy, which is abhorrent. You're looking at one of the biggest economies in the world. So I think that's one of the biggest threats, especially when the reason why we're in this crisis is nothing to do with domestic policy. Although our domestic policy makers are making very sure we have no chance to succeed. It's like, they're like, okay, it's mad, okay, cool, let's multiply it. Like, unfortunately for us, but like, we can't stop Putin. Well, we tried, but it's not working. Putin's like, whatever, man, drop some more bombs. Like, that's not really working, do you know what I'm saying? And the Bank of England are going to start increasing interest rates to tackle inflation is out of control. So I think that is the biggest threat, that the macroeconomic situation is having real life impact on our day to day. Sometimes things happen in the markets, and they're complaining, oh, so and so stuff. It doesn't move any of us. People say, oh, Elon Musk lost 15% of his wealth. Like, okay, what does that mean, bro? he's still up, but like, this stuff is really impacting everybody. And I think another potential threat to us is what happens with the politics, because the next person coming in, they have such a big job in policy, and if they go to austerity, when a lot of the black community work in the public sector, they're trying to find ways to cut public sector. You know what I'm saying? So people won't be seeing the wages increase that they're meant to. People might see their jobs just go to the moon. Do you know what I'm saying? Not to me, but do you know what I mean? In terms of opportunities, but it's quite sad, because opportunities are really only for those who actually have the surplus income. And I like to be realistic, like, the majority of people do not have the surplus income to benefit from opportunities. And that's why over the last since 2008, I can't remember when a gentleman had mentioned the issues of wealth equality, because people with money, when things go completely haywire, interest rates are low, they're raising whatever they're doing, when we don't have the ability to go, oh, do you know what? Okay, cool. The economy is going down. These stocks are a bit cheaper. We can dip in. It's the people that have money that can go do that. So if you got £50 after you pay all your bills, there's no opportunities for you, realistically. So yeah, it's actually very scary, and I actually do worry a lot for British people, especially our community. I am worried, but all I could just advise is try to scrape where you can in terms of being energy efficient. And if you have the capacity, maybe switch jobs, contracts, get an additional job. Obviously, don't burn yourself out. But yeah, it's going to be very difficult in the next year or two.
Yeah,
Sorry.
It's kind of depressing, actually, when we think about it. We are running short of time. There was one more question that was on the Slido that I wanted to bring up and give the panelists like a quick fire, like maybe 30 seconds to respond to. And that was the question on how do we tackle the personal responsibility narrative. I think we could combine that with another question. If we just get up the list again. I saw a question, but it's actually gone. So we'll focus on that. So like, how do we tackle with the personal responsibility, kind of lacks nuance and places the blame on individuals? So I guess this question is getting on what we can do collectively as a community. I wanted to ask you, the panelists, and also as you're ending, to give maybe one point you want the audience to take away with maybe a solution you think that we should do, which is based on this question. So take it away. I'm gonna time you. 1 minute. Let's go.
I was going to say, I think that the personal responsibility narrative can be really disenfranchising. And unfortunately, when times are hard, people become a lot more individualistic. But what we need to be doing is becoming a lot more communal. So I like to use this reference a lot, but growing up, I was raised by a single mum, and she didn't have to pay much for childcare because she had other people that were able to do that, and they did it rotationally. So when they worked shifts, they were able to work together and say, you work this shift, you look after the kids. So they didn't have that crazy bill coming out of their account for childcare. But nowadays, that's, because of people, I guess, living further away, being a lot more hush-hush, being a lot more distrusting, that's harder to achieve. So returning to things where it's a lot easier to do certain things as a community when times are hard, it does help. It does save us a lot of money. It does mean that, the burden isn't as heavy. So I think that's the personal responsibility narrative is ultimately quite disenfranchising and furthers the dive to poverty, in my opinion.
Thank you. That was on time. Thanks. Ayo?
I think the people have started to get rid of this narrative themselves because it's slapping everybody now. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was all well and good when it was, do you know what I mean, the underprivileged, but now even middle class people's pockets get slapped. Right, my mortgage gone up 5 bills. Now everybody's waking up. In terms of what we can do, I do believe, I always believe in the element of personal responsibility, but within reason. Like, if the economy is finished, what can I do about it? I'm just a man or just a woman, do you know what I'm saying? But I think, piggyback off what Shomi said, I think definitely community. I think that definitely helps, because especially in times like this where your income or your ability may be limited, that's when family really, really helps. Friends really, really helps. Like, I'm in group chats where people are giving people like tips on how to save money, or like, here's this deal, you can save your money in your shopping, that type of thing. I think that level of community feel, I think, is so important in times like this, because we're actually all in the mud together, unfortunately.
Yeah. All right. That was on time as well. Yeah. And then finally, Iman, what have you got to say?
I agree with everything that's been said. I think the big thing for me when I speak to people is people to realise that where their value comes from. Like, I think in a time like this, people need to understand that you're already valuable. Like, there's no clothes, trainers, car, it doesn't define you. And I think when we start to understand that we're already valuable, I'm sure you've not seen like rich white people, they dress like, if they sat down, you might give them a $5. Like, do you understand? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, it's just so plain and so, but they've got a special gift. It's called online banking. And when you go there, you see the truth, And I think we have come from a place where, you go to church and you dress up and even though you're broke, like, but you're going there, your best clothes, you cream up your face, look, shine for God. Like, you need to let the packaging go. We need to let the packaging go and just understand that, it's a hard time for everybody. And so understand you're already valuable and then focus on value. At a time like now, when people are looking around, if you can add value, you can make money. So focus on what value can you add, who needs the value that you can add, and how can you get it to them? And you'll increase your income and make money.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our panelists for today. We can just give them a round of applause. And thank you to you guys for coming and being in the audience, sharing questions and stuff like that. Sorry we wasn't able to get to all of the questions, but there will be opportunities for us to have more events where hopefully you guys can attend. But yes, thank you again. We're now going to wrap up, but we have about 20 minutes or so upstairs to network. Eat the food, please eat the food. Please, you can take it home. We're not going to be here tomorrow, so please enjoy. So thank you everyone.